At my grandmother's while reading, my parents split her $4.2 million fortune like dessert, tossed me a fake gold necklace, and told me to be grateful. But the sealed envelope the lawyer opened next made my father go silent for the first time in my life. I didn't even sit at the main table. They had me off to the side like a family friend or an awkward plus one, not the granddaughter who spent every summer braiding grandma's hair and rubbing lotion into the bruises she never talked about. My mother wore white, like it was a wedding, not a will reading, and my father leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of something expensive, all loose-limbed and smug, making jokes to the lawyer about how grandma always loved drama. I sat quiet, hands under the table, fingers working at a frayed seam in my coat sleeve. They didn't cry, not when the estate was listed, not when the number 4.2 million was read aloud, not when the photos were passed around. They nodded, sighed, smiled politely. My mother gave a performance, dabbing dry eyes with a tissue, her wedding ring catching the light. She always liked center stage, especially when she thought she'd won something. My father only spoke when money was mentioned, his voice calm, low, charming, the kind of voice that makes people think he's decent, and when the lawyer handed them each a folder, they opened them in sync, like trained dancers. In a two-person show, I was expecting nothing, maybe a thank you letter, a scarf, maybe some meaningless trinket, so when Mr. Fletcher turned to me and placed a tiny box on the table, it felt like more than I'd imagined. It had a ribbon, thin and silver. My fingers shook a little as I untied it. Inside was a necklace, flat gold, no tag, no engraving. It clinked softly when I lifted it, and then I heard my mother's breath, a soft scoff, like she'd stepped in something sticky. My father didn't bother hiding his smile, just said, "Well, she always did like shiny things, didn't she?" They were giddy, that's the word for it, like the inheritance confirmed some secret theory they'd always whispered behind closed doors. My father turned toward me and tilted his glass, said, "Be grateful, Camille," like it was a punchline, then leaned in and added, "Some children just aren't worth it," but I suppose she had a soft spot, and it wasn't even the words that burned. It was the casual way he said them, like we were strangers, like he hadn't seen me wipe blood from grandma's lips last winter, like I wasn't even in the room, just a placeholder. I didn't say anything, not because I was scared, but because silence felt cleaner, safer. I didn't trust my own voice, not in front of them, not in that room. Mr. Fletcher gave me a look then, not pity exactly, something more neutral, like he knew this wasn't his first strange family ending and wouldn't be his last. Then he cleared his throat, adjusted his tie, and said, "There's one more item." The air changed. Just slightly. My mother froze, her nails clicking against her wineglass, and my father straightened, but slowly, like he was trying not to show he noticed. The envelope was sealed, thick paper, hand-addressed, and dated just 3 weeks before Grandma died. Mr. Fletcher held it like it weighed more than it should have, his hands careful, almost reverent. He said, "Your grandmother left specific instructions that this be opened in the presence of all beneficiaries," then looked straight at me, then at my parents. His tone flat, deliberate, like he didn't want any part of whatever was about to unfold. My father laughed, quick and dismissive, said, "She always did love her secrets," and reached for his drink again, but the laugh didn't land, not this time. When Mr. Fletcher opened it, the crackle of the paper felt louder than it should have, and for a second, the whole room just held its breath. Inside was a handwritten note and a notarized amendment. He scanned them both, then cleared his throat again, slower this time, and said, "Your grandmother made an additional provision, one not reflected in the distributed estate." My mother's eyes narrowed, just a flicker. My father put down his glass, and Mr. Fletcher turned to me, his voice shifting, almost apologetic now. "Camille, you've been named the sole heir to a separate account, held in trust, entirely under your name." Everything after that was noise, my parents' voices rising, questions tossed like grenades. "What account?" "That's not possible." She was senile. She didn't understand legal structure. "This is a mistake. We'll contest it." But I didn't look at them. Not once. I looked at the letter, at Grandma's familiar loops and strokes, her tiny precise handwriting. And I saw my name written out in full, Camille Annette Mercer. I'd only ever heard her use that when she was serious, when she meant something, and in that moment, I realized. She had known everything, every slight, every theft, every silence, and she'd waited. Subscribe if you want more stories that speak what doesn't usually get said. We tell them slowly, and we tell them true. My father leaned forward, hands clenched, knuckles paling against the polished oak table. The lawyer didn't flinch, just slid over the trust documents like he'd done it 1,000 times. My mother reached for them first, eyes scanning too fast to process anything. Her lips tightening with every line. "This says separate from the estate," she murmured. "How is that even?" And Mr. Fletcher, calm as ever, said, "The account was created 4 years ago, separate from probate, structured through a family trust with private beneficiary terms." He looked at me, then added, "Camille met those terms. Exclusively." She didn't understand what she was doing, my father snapped, sharp now, voice harder than before, like he wanted to rattle the walls. But Fletcher didn't blink. "Your mother was of sound mind," he replied. "This was reviewed by 2 legal advisors, notarized, and filed." My mother shook her head, fast and shallow, her hands trembling slightly. "But why her?" she whispered, like it was the one question she hadn't prepared to ask, and I sat there, still holding the necklace in my palm, its chain warm from my skin, wondering how long Grandma had been planning this and why she never told me. The letter came next, not long, handwritten, folded once, yellowed at the creases. Fletcher asked if I wanted to read it privately, but I said no before I even thought about it. Something about the way my parents kept glancing at each other made me want them to hear it, every word. I opened it carefully, Grandma's handwriting looping and soft, the ink a little faded. The first line said, "Camille, this is for your hands only, but your voice if you choose." So I read, slowly, clearly, each word. Sounding older than the last, heavier too, like she'd written them with time. "I saw more than you thought," I read aloud, "and heard more than I ever repeated." My father shifted in his seat, shoulders stiff, jaw locked. "You loved me when there was nothing to gain, and stayed kind when there was so much reason not to be." I paused, swallowing. The room so quiet I could hear the antique clock on the wall ticking behind me. They wanted me to forget what I saw. Camille, the way they spoke to each other when they thought I was asleep, the calls I wasn't meant to hear, the documents that were moved and shredded. My mother stood up then, sudden and loud, her chair scraping across the tile like it was screaming. "This is manipulation," she said, voice pitching high, like she was trying to talk over something rising inside her. She was ill. She was always confused near the end. Fletcher raised a hand gently, palm open. "Steady, Mrs. Mercer," he said. "Your mother's mental competency was affirmed 3 weeks before her death by 2 independent medical evaluations." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, but nothing came out this time. My father leaned back in his chair like he was recalibrating something he'd thought he could control. "She didn't even like her," he muttered, as if saying it made it true. "She always called her too soft, too emotional, too much trouble." His eyes flicked to me for a moment, then back to the table. "This is sentimental guilt, nothing more." And maybe that would have worked on someone else, someone who hadn't sat with Grandma while she cried over photographs or spent hours listening to the same stories just to make her feel less alone. I didn't speak. I just handed the letter to Fletcher, folded, now smooth again, and looked out the window instead. Outside, the clouds had thickened, soft gray bleeding into darker blue. The light in the room changed with it, turning cool, like dusk arriving too early. Mr. Fletcher slid a thick manila envelope toward me then. No label, just my name written in Grandma's hand. "This contains additional documentation," he said. "Bank records, correspondence, audio logs, passwords to the external drive, the trust's charter. All under your authority now." My mother exhaled, harsh and uneven, like she'd been holding her breath for the last hour. "You can't seriously be giving her power of access," she said, "over everything." "I'm not giving her anything," Fletcher replied. "Your mother did that herself," and for a moment, there was nothing else, just silence and the weight of what had already happened, not what might happen next. My hands didn't shake when I picked up the envelope. But they didn't feel steady either, not exactly. The seal was still intact, still smooth, still warm from where Fletcher had been holding it, and my parents didn't look at me, not even once. They just looked at the envelope, like it was the mouth of something alive, something they'd both thought was long dead. The manila envelope felt heavier once I was alone, like it had gained weight on the walk from the law office to my apartment, the paper warm under my arm, edges soft from being handled. I didn't open it right away. Just set it on the kitchen counter and stared at it while the kettle hissed and clicked. The silence around me didn't feel peaceful, it felt loaded, like a room where someone had just shouted and walked out. I poured tea, let it steep too long, then sat on the floor with my back against the fridge and peeled the flap open. Inside were smaller envelopes, each marked in Grandma's handwriting, delicate but firm, like she'd written with purpose. One said Michael's calls, another said December account movements, and the thickest one, near the bottom, said read this first. I opened that one, pulled out a folded letter and 5 printed pages stapled at the top corner. The letter was short, less formal than the will note, just a few lines. Camille, if you're reading this, then they've already played their hand, and I've chosen mine. Don't rush, don't answer right away. Let truth walk in before you do anything else. Signed with her name and a pressed lavender flower. The stapled pages were spreadsheets, not fancy, just hand-typed lists, one column for dates, another for amounts, then brief notes, like withdrawal, unscheduled, or wire transfer. Unknown recipient. The numbers were sickening. Rows of $5,000 here, $8,300 there, amounts just small enough to slip through unnoticed or unchallenged. I didn't recognize most of the recipient names, but I recognized the pattern, and it wasn't messy. It was consistent, methodical, like someone had been testing what they could get away with and found out the answer was, apparently, everything. I read through them twice, slowly the second time, tracing the columns with my finger, my stomach tightening with every line. Grandma hadn't been paranoid. She'd been watching, waiting, documenting each detail while smiling across the table at Sunday brunch. I remembered the way my mother used to say, she's sharp in her own way, always with that tight smile that meant the opposite, and now I saw it plain. She hadn't trusted them, maybe not for a long time, maybe not ever. The next envelope had voice memos, labeled by date, each one burned onto a tiny CD with handwritten titles. I didn't own a CD player, so I took the old laptop from the back of the hall closet, the one I hadn't used since college. It wheezed when it powered up, the fan sounding tired and old, but it worked. The disc slid in with a soft click, and the first file opened automatically. I heard the sound of the dining room clock first, ticking faintly in the background, then Grandma's voice, clear and low, speaking like she was writing something in her head. This is from July 14th, after the insurance call, she said. Michael had left the line open. I heard everything. Then came the call, scratchy but audible, my father's voice crisp, professional at first. If she signs it now, we can move the second account without issue. Then quieter, she barely understands what she's looking at. Another voice, maybe someone from the bank, said something I couldn't make out, and then my father again, laughing. It's not fraud if she smiles while you do it. I paused the recording, sat back on the floor, my tea long gone cold, my hands sticky from gripping the laptop too hard. Grandma hadn't just left me money, she'd left a timeline, an indictment. The next recording was worse, my mother this time, sharper tone, clipped phrases. She forgets things on purpose, I swear it. She was saying, we should have taken full control years ago. Then a laugh, not light, not joyful, more like something someone does when they don't think anyone is listening, and I felt my chest ache in that old familiar way. Not because I was shocked, but because I wasn't. These weren't strangers. These were the people who raised me, the ones who taught me to say thank you, even when something hurt, who told me silence was grace. I closed the laptop and pushed it across the floor, the apartment quiet again, but not still. I could hear my own breath catching slightly, like something was pressing against my ribs. The envelope lay open beside me. The lavender flower from the letter had fallen into my lap, dried and fragile. I picked it up carefully, turned it in my fingers, and thought of the Sunday mornings I used to make toast with Grandma while she told stories about her garden. She'd once said, lavender grows strongest when ignored, and maybe she hadn't been talking about flowers at all. I didn't call them, didn't send an email, didn't say anything at all for 6 days. During that time, I read everything twice, then a third time out loud to myself in the middle of the night, like if I heard it enough, it would stop feeling like something I could still smell in the walls. Mr. Fletcher called once to confirm my receipt of the trust documents, his voice polite, distant, almost relieved. He asked if I needed help managing the next steps. I told him I was still reading. He said to take my time, the way people do when they know what's coming. On the 7th day, I walked downtown, the air cold enough to bite but clear, dry, the kind of weather Grandma used to call clean light. I passed the gallery where my mother hosted her seasonal evenings. I paused, half out of habit, then stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed once, sharp and high. The receptionist didn't recognize me, which didn't surprise me. My mother always made sure I came through the back. Her voice came from one of the side rooms, light and practiced. She was showing a new piece, something about shadows and inheritance. I waited. She stepped out a few minutes later, still holding a wine glass, wearing black like it made her more interesting. Her smile faltered when she saw me, then adjusted, softer, warmer, rehearsed. "Camille," she said, like she hadn't been dodging my silence all week. I was wondering when we'd talk. She walked over slowly, didn't hug me, didn't reach for my hand, just looked at my face like she was waiting for a sign she could still shape the outcome. I didn't give her one, just said, I read everything, and watched her mouth stay still for one full second before she blinked. "Your grandmother was always dramatic," she said, her tone shifting, sliding between sympathy and control. She liked to feel in charge, even when she wasn't. Her eyes scanned my face the way she used to look at her own reflection, checking for cracks. I didn't answer. "Just let her keep talking. You have to understand, Camille, that woman was good at making people feel sorry for her and your father. He tried his best, even when she made it hard." She looked past me then, out the gallery window. "We all did," she added, as if exhaustion was the only explanation. "I listened to the calls," I said, quietly, and she went still again, slower this time, like her body was catching up to the meaning. She didn't ask which ones, didn't ask how many, just looked back at me and said she was confused. She recorded things out of context, and I knew she was adjusting, trying to pivot, trying to frame it like something she could still manage. "Camille, if you bring this up formally, it'll follow you too. You'll be attached to it. It'll get messy." She wouldn't have wanted that, but I wasn't 11 anymore. I didn't need protecting from discomfort. I didn't respond, just turned and walked out the same way I came in. The bell above the door didn't sound as sharp the second time. Maybe I was expecting it now. I walked 2 blocks to the bank, handed the manager the authorization letter Fletcher gave me, and requested the account transfer paperwork. The woman behind the desk was kind, her voice quiet and efficient. She didn't ask questions when she saw my last name, just printed forms and handed them over. Her nails were painted soft blue, chipped at the edges. I watched them as I signed. The funds were moved by Thursday into a clean account in my name, linked to a financial advisor who'd known my grandmother for decades, someone I remembered vaguely from her garden parties, a woman named Bernice, who wore brooches and asked gentle questions. "I always wondered when she'd tell you," Bernice said, pouring tea into a real porcelain cup. Her office smelled like roses and cedar. She was waiting for the right moment. I asked what she meant, and Bernice just smiled, setting the sugar bowl closer to me. "You'll understand when you start using the money," she said, and not a minute before. That weekend, I bought groceries without checking my balance, paid off my student loan in a single quiet online transaction, then sent an email to my boss with my 2 weeks' notice. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm. Like something in me had finally gone quiet. I folded the spreadsheets into a file and placed them at the back of my closet, beside the CDs and her dried lavender. I didn't touch the necklace again. Not yet, but I didn't throw it away either. Some things deserve to be kept, even if only as reminders of where the story really began. I hadn't planned to see my father, but he was there when I pulled up to the house, standing near the garage, sleeves rolled up, like he'd just come from fixing something. though nothing ever broke unless someone else touched it. The yard looked the same. The porch light still tilted from the storm last year. He watched me park, didn't wave, didn't call out, just waited, hands on his hips, like I was late for something I didn't know I'd agreed to. I stepped out slowly, the gravel crunching under my boots louder than either of us needed it to be. "Your mother says you've been busy," he said, once I got close enough, his voice even, like he hadn't said what he'd said at the will reading, like I hadn't heard him laugh about children not being worth it. "Didn't expect you to come back here." I didn't answer. Just looked past him at the window above the sink, the curtains still yellow with tiny green dots, the same ones Grandma used to say were cheerful. "You here to yell?" He asked, quieter now, maybe trying something different, or are we past that already? I didn't move. "I came to return something," I said, reaching into my coat pocket. The necklace was still there, the cheap gold worm from my palm, the clasp bent, the chain tangled. I held it out without speaking. His eyes dropped to it, stayed there, not confused, just unwilling. "It was never hers," he said. "Eventually, I bought it last minute. We didn't have time to." But I was already shaking my head, not because it mattered, but because the lie didn't even sound finished. "I'm not here for explanations," I said. "You can keep it or throw it out, either way." He took it, slowly, then turned it over in his hand like he expected to find a trick hidden inside. "She always liked you better," he said, after a long pause. "Even when you were a kid, you reminded her of someone, I don't know who." He gave a short laugh. Not amused, more like a release of something he didn't want to hold anymore. "I used to try harder, back when it still felt like it had changed something." I looked at him then, really looked, and realized he didn't expect forgiveness, just maybe less silence than the kind he'd given me. "I don't hate you," I said, not gently, but true. "But I don't owe you either." His face tightened, not insulted, more like someone being asked to stand up before they were ready. "She left me the account because she trusted me, and because she knew what you were doing." He didn't deny it, didn't argue, just rubbed his face with one hand, like the words stung more than a slap might have. "You were smart," he said finally. "You waited." I nodded, not because it was a compliment, but because it was the first honest thing he'd said to me all year. I left without going inside, without asking about my old room or checking if Grandma's photos were still on the hallway wall. I didn't need proof. I'd already carried her with me longer than I realized. I stopped at a gas station on the way back, bought coffee I didn't want, and watched the rain hit the windshield for 10 straight minutes. The air smelled like pavement and new mud. I thought about the lavender, the way she used to press it into books, how she once told me, "Things survive better when they're flattened, not broken," and I finally understood. 2 weeks later, I mailed a check to the nursing home where she'd volunteered on Wednesdays. The director called to say thank you, her voice shaking just enough to make me sit down. "She used to leave envelopes here too," she said, "small ones, cash mostly. Always with a note that said use this where the government won't." I asked if she'd ever mentioned me, and the woman laughed gently. Every time someone asked her if she had grandkids, she'd say, "Just one." That's all I needed, and I didn't know what to say to that, so I just listened. Spring came quietly, like it always does when you stop watching for it. I planted something for the first time in years. Herbs mostly, small ones that don't need too much attention. I kept her letters in the top drawer of my desk, and every now and then I'd unfold one and run my thumb along the edge, not to read it again, just to remember the weight of her handwriting. Some things she said still haven't reached me yet, but I think they will, one day, and when they do, I'll be ready for them. The way she was ready for me.